So this story starts with a guy named Joseph J. Juan Maullo. He's 33. Living in California, and for reasons nobody really understands, he decides one day that his next big move in life is to threaten TikTok's Los Angeles headquarters. It's early October, and out of nowhere, Maullo starts posting violent threats online, messages aimed directly at TikTok's office in Culver City. Now, most people talk nonsense online and disappear into the algorithm, but Maullo's posts, they stand out. Employees at TikTok see what he's saying and immediately flag it to the police. They don't wait. The company goes into full lockdown mode. Security clears the entire building out of an abundance of caution, and suddenly, one of the world's biggest social media companies is in full panic. Culver City police jump on it fast. They track Maullo down, get arrest and search warrants, and by that night, their emergency response team is outside his place. They bring in crisis negotiators, because remember, this guy has made violent threats, and no one knows what he's capable of. For 90 tense minutes, police try to talk him down. Neighbors are awake, watching from behind curtains as lights flash and negotiators shout into the night. Eventually, around 1 a.m. Maullo steps outside. Hands up, he gives himself up peacefully. He's booked into the Culver City jail. Bail set at $100,000. Police search his place and say they recovered items of evidentiary value, which is a fancy way of saying, yeah, we found some things that don't look great. Authorities say this whole event proves one thing: they're not playing around when it comes to public safety. The police chief even released a statement saying, "We take all threats seriously." Maullo was arraigned a few days later and pleaded not guilty. His preliminary hearing is set for October 21st, and for now, he's still sitting in custody, waiting to see what happens next. It's one of those stories that shows how fast an online rant can turn into a real-life police standoff. Meet Radiant, two men in the UK, a 22-year-old and a 17-year-old who allegedly hacked into an international preschool chain called Keto and exposed its most private files. What followed reads like a grotesque, modern cartoon. Instead of treasure chests and gold coins, they hauled off photos, names, and addresses of thousands of children and waved the loot around on the dark web. They didn't bury what they'd stolen. They posted snippets and then dialed parents, demanding a king's ransom, roughly £600,000 in Bitcoin, while claiming they'd hired people to make the calls so they could keep their hands clean. Parents answered the phone and heard strangers trying to turn fear into cash. Keto operates preschools across London and abroad. The breach reportedly touched data for around 8,000 children. Imagine thousands of families suddenly forced to reckon with strangers holding their kids' pictures and private notes like cards in a hand and making threats to monetize them. British authorities moved in. The Metropolitan Police arrested the two suspects, and the country's data protection regulator said it was assessing the damage. Investigators say Keto never paid, and as it turned out, the hackers likely didn't walk away with the loot they wanted. Public reaction was a mix of outrage and disbelief. Cybersecurity experts called it a chilling escalation. Weaponizing intimate data about children for ransom crosses a line that makes ordinary cybercrime feel barbaric. The former head of the UK's cyber agency tried to calm fears about physical danger, but for the families involved, the psychological impact is very real. The suspects, who told a news outlet, "We do it for money," and admitted this wasn't their first time, used the alias Radiant, and showed no remorse. One even boasted that English wasn't their first language, and seemed oddly proud of the operation. The whole affair read like a twisted publicity stunt, menace dressed up as entrepreneurship. In the quiet suburbs of Essex, England, the unthinkable unfolded inside a small family home. 5-year-old Lincoln Button, a bright boy with autism who loved rainbows and toy trains, was found lifeless. Beside him, his mother, Claire Button, barely clinging to life. Her husband Nicky returned home that evening to a scene no one should ever witness. His son gone, his wife unconscious, and a chilling note that read, "DNR. Do not resuscitate." Another note whispered, "He doesn't fit in this world. And where he doesn't fit, I don't either." Prosecutors say that on December 15, 2024, Claire smothered her son to death before trying to end her own life. For months, she had battled deep depression. She'd been admitted to a mental health facility that summer, medicated, stabilized, but by autumn, the darkness had returned. That morning, Claire called emergency services, telling them she planned to overdose. The operator told her it could take up to 10 hours for an ambulance to arrive. By the time her husband walked through the door, it was already too late. In court, prosecutors called it a deliberate act, a moment where despair turned deadly. Family members still can't understand. Lincoln's cousin remembered him as a happy kid who loved toys and trains. Now, Claire Buttonstand's trial for murder, having admitted to manslaughter, has a family and a community search for answers that may never come, because sometimes the heaviest battles are the ones no one sees. This story takes us to Stanton, Kentucky, a small town where October means pumpkins on porches, spiderwebs on fences, and families getting ready for Halloween. But this year, one man's version of spooky season went way too far. His name is Stephen Markham, 58 years old, and when police showed up to his house on Court Street, what they found wasn't your typical Halloween display. Lying across his front yard were 5 fake bodies, each one wrapped in garbage bags like something out of a true crime documentary. At first glance, it might have looked like a dark sense of humor until neighbors noticed the labels. One body tag read Mayor, another CA, then Cis, and zoning MGR. But the most disturbing of all, one figure was hanging from an elevated position, a rope tied tight around its neck, and a tag that read District Judge. This wasn't just creepy. This was personal. Local residents were stunned. Some thought it was a prank, others were too scared to laugh. One official, Judge Executive Eddie Barnes, even drove by and said later, "I didn't know what to think. It was kinda harsh." Police didn't waste any time. Kentucky state troopers arrived that Saturday and arrested Markham on charges of intimidating a participant in the legal process and third-degree terroristic threatening. When officers asked him about the bodies, Markham refused to explain anything. He simply told them he did not want to speak about his so-called Halloween decorations. He was taken to the Powell County Detention Center, booked on a $5,000 bond, and is now waiting for his court date to be set. For a town used to jack-o'-lanterns and fake cobwebs, this scene was something else entirely. A chilling reminder that sometimes the scariest things you'll see in October aren't ghosts or monsters, they're the people down the street. This story begins in Handsworth, England. On a quiet morning in March 2019, a 45-year-old man named Thomas Samuel is at home, minding his business, when his life is suddenly ripped apart. It's around 8:45 a.m. when a white van pulls up to his house on Raleigh Close. What happens next is still the stuff of nightmares. Thomas is kidnapped, taken against his will, and driven away. No one around knows what's happening. No one sees where he's being taken. He just vanishes. 2 hours later, horrifying hours, there's a frantic banging at the door of a house in Bickerstaff, Lancashire, nearly 100 miles away. The homeowner opens the door, and standing there is Thomas. His body is covered in burns to 75% of his skin destroyed. He can barely speak, but he's begging for help. Emergency services rush him to the hospital, fighting to keep him alive, and somehow, he holds on for almost 3 months. But on June 21, 2019, his body finally gives out. Thomas dies from his injuries, leaving behind a mystery that would take years to unravel. For a long time, police had almost nothing, no solid suspects, no motive, just a burned van, and a man who'd been tortured beyond belief. But the investigation didn't stop. Detectives worked the case for years, determined to bring whoever did this to justice. And now, finally, they say they've found him. His name is Tobias Kozlowski, 38 years old. On October 7th, West Midlands police announced that Kozlowski has been charged with murder, conspiracy to kidnap, conspiracy to falsely imprison, and conspiracy to cause grievous bodily harm with intent. Police say he was part of a group. People who plotted this attack, carried it out, and left Thomas to die in agony. Kozlowski has already appeared in court in Birmingham and was remanded into custody. His next court date is set for October 24th. Also arrested was Sandra Kozlowska, 37, believed to be connected to Tobias. She's facing a charge of assisting an offender, and she too is set to appear before the judge later this month. Investigators say they're not done yet. Detective Superintendent Scott Griffith said, "We have not stopped in our pursuit of justice for Thomas and his loved ones. And after more than 5 years, they're finally closer than ever to finding out who was behind one of the most brutal and haunting kidnappings the UK has seen in recent memory."